Good evening. Welcome to the Flagler Planning and Development Board meeting for November 8th, 2022. If we could start with the roll call, please.
Michael Boyd.
Here.
Timothy Connor. Here. Jack Corbett.
Here.
And Heather Haywood advised us that she would be absent this evening. Mark Langello. Anthony Lombardo.
Here.
And Fernando Melendez also advised us he would be out. So we do have a quorum with 4.
Thank you. If you could please join me with the pledge. Pledge allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, tonight, this is a quasi-judicial process, so on any topics, the audience should refrain from any clapping, shouts of approval or disapproval or disagreement. This is to avoid potential legal ramification and possible overturning of any decisions by the court. A public hearing must be fair in 3 respects: form, substance, and appearance. We'll have time limits for staff presentation will be 10 minutes. Applicant will have 15 minutes. Public comments will be 3 minutes per speaker, or 5 minutes if someone is speaking on behalf of a organized group. Applicant rebuttal and closing staff comments will be 10 minutes each.
Here.
All right. Mr. Langello's here. Thank you for coming. With that, we do need to approve the minutes from the October 11th meeting.
Motion to approve. Second.
A motion, a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Okay, minutes are approved. Item 4 on the agenda, this is also quasi-judicial, requiring any disclosure of ex parte communication for board members.
No, sir.
That's all, you should be ready.
All right, none to disclose. Application 3328, a variance. So turn it over to Mr. Mangle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the subject property in these graphics, I'll go through these graphics first. This is lot 157 in the Ormond Beach East, I think it's the East subdivision. And so you'll see the lot here in the detail. This is on the aerial. This is our future land use map that shows residential low-density rural estate, 1 acre minimum for those lots, and that this, of course, is a lot of record, the same as its neighboring lots. All of these lots platted prior to both the comprehensive plan and land development code coming into effect. Here's the zoning zoning on that. Here's the zoning R1 for the neighborhood, rural residential, single-family homes or modular homes, no mobile homes within the R1 zoning district, 1 acre minimums. So you do have this established and still as the lot of record for these. That's important because that does have a lot of record setbacks that you'll see here in a moment. This is the special flood hazard area map. This is also taken from the property appraiser's map, the overlay, the green here showing the areas of special flood hazard zone AE, and then the shaded part that's brown known as shaded X. The shaded X would be outside the special flood hazard, green would be within it. And so within that area, construction on this lot, such as part of that special flood hazard, would then have to have its be elevated to 1 foot above the base flood elevation for any occupied construction. And then you have the soils map that I've been including here also in most of our presentations in the past. Pomelo fine sand, not indicative of any wetland areas or any concern as a depressional soil type, so that pomelo is not one of those depressional soils, and that is consistent with what we see with the National Wetlands Inventory. No designated wetlands within this vicinity. So the quick synopsis of what we're looking at here, the lot 157 Ormond Beach East, just under a quarter of an acre, right around that 10,000 square foot mark. The dimensions are 80 feet by 125 feet for the lot, 80 feet of frontage, front and rear, and 125 on the sides. And then 7.5-foot wide utility drainage easements are present on all side and rear lot lines through the plat. Parcel was purchased in 2014. There's an 1,800 square foot modular home that was permitted in 2020 and then finalized January 11th, 2021. And then this variance concerns the proposed 480 square foot garage, 24 feet by 20 feet with its dimensions. This is a before the fact variance, and what this variance has been requested for is that 8-foot setback variance, the separation between structures. This is specific within the residential districts, and you'll see that here in just a second. But it's a 10-foot minimum separation of accessory structures from their principal structure. And so here is a summary table I put together. It was in your technical staff report. I've repeated it here. And so what I wanted to point out here, that first column on the left shows your R1 setbacks and the separation requirement at the bottom, and then you have lot of record. And so that's of note because it has the reduction. The 10-foot side yard interior drops to 7.5 for lot of record. But remember, in this particular subdivision, we have a 7.5-foot side drainage and utility easement. And so you actually end up being set back maybe 8.5 or 9 feet, depending on the width of your eave. Remember that we're measuring our setbacks always from the foundation line, the wall of the home, and the wall of the accessory structure. So just wanted to mention that there. And then accessory buildings then in that final column, those are a little unique for us because it talks about accessory buildings if they're 12 feet or less in height. Then these provisions apply if you're above 12 feet mean roof height for your accessory building. Then you're meeting the principal use structural setbacks so that you go back to that R1 setup that we have here. And one thing to note, and did speak with Mr. Langelo about this, I mentioned this to the contractor. I think Mr. Smith's going to talk about this, but we had talked about this at TRC level. One of the questions that had come up was, could you take these two buildings and link them together? And you'll see that here in a second. If we did that, then the accessory becomes as if it's part of the principal. And so then what you see here on this graphic is your rear yard then becomes 20 feet versus the 10 feet. And so, yeah, you could do that, but then effectively what you're doing is you're shifting that burden for the setback then to the rear. It's possible, all things are possible. Let the contractor talk more directly about how that could work because we are connecting a modular to what effectively is a stick-built accessory building, that garage with the porch, not part of a modular plan. The home was modular. The shed is going to be built on site. And so that there is a possibility to connect that with a breezeway or common roof line. And then you'll see also the treatment that I have in the discussion I have in the technical staff report, a bit of a concern about the building code requirement. So we have a building code separation requirement that comes into play here also. 3 foot being that separation that's needed, this being then down to about 2 feet because that's just what's needed in order to meet the 10-foot rear setback with the dimensions of the garage as provided. And so that if we're at less than 3 feet, building code requires that portion that's within that area of the accessory structure be given some fire treatment, some fireproofing, and you'll see that I put that into the condition that I've mentioned. But that's something that another tie-in. If they were connected, that requirement would not be needed. So you wouldn't have that separation. It would be as if it was part of the single unit. And then what we would be doing, instead of looking for a variance for the separation to reduce that from 10 feet down to 2 feet and 8-foot variance, we would be shifting that to the rear. In my opinion, if we kept everything just like it is, you'd have that same 8-foot variance then on the rear, reducing that 20-foot rear setback down to a 12-foot rear. We were looking at this as being probably the less offensive one to the neighbors, because when you discuss rear setbacks, that's the impacts to them. It maybe in material sense, though, there really isn't a difference here because it's the same garage. It would just be in a different context. So in effect, if we had them both linked together, the modular home connected to the shed, and we did then instead a rear setback variance for 8 feet, Assuming the connection happens, you'd have then, instead of 20-foot separation, 12-foot, neighbors would actually be gaining an extra 2 feet. Hopefully I haven't lost everybody. This is the site plan that's included within the packet. You can see north arrow at the very top, and that's pointing down, kind of down and to our left. I'll zoom in so we can get a better view of this. But what I wanted to note here is that this does show the 25-foot minimum front setback, 25 feet on that left-hand side, 25 feet on the right-hand side. And then we have our, I don't know if it even shows it here, if I can do the math. I think we ended up having 30 feet on the rear, or 32. I don't see it now, but I did note it in the staff report. Maybe it was 32. But the math works out 20, 10, and then the 2 feet, I think, was the difference. So it should be 32 at the rear. Then here's that detail of this area we're talking about. So on the shed on the side would meet the 10-foot side minimum setback. We have no issue there. It meets the 10-foot rear. We have no issue to the rear. As it's presented, the separation then with the 2-foot separation is our concern. 10-foot minimum is what it's to be. Your wide dimension then on the shed is that 24 feet. Your depth there is 20. If you imagine this being broken up into 4 quadrants, so you have a 12 by 10 here, 12 by 10 in this, what is the northwest corner, northwest corner, this is the open porch that adjoins the home. And so there's an open porch. You'll see it in the plans here in a moment. And so that's good that that's an open construction. That's helpful for us in the considerations of the building code. And so that's an open portion. And then this portion, this 10-foot, 12-foot by 10-foot in this corner, which ends up being your northeast corner, ends up being the portion that's intended for the garage with the garage door opening. So here's those elevations. This top one being, it's mislabeled, it's actually the north or the front elevation that's depicted there. And so this is the open porch on that half, gable in then facing towards the back side of the modular, and then here's that single bay garage. Then you have the west side, which is correct. It's the west side. This is the open porch here on this half, and then the back side, the back side of the garage. So the garage would go down and then come around to the back side with an additional storage area behind. So that, and what you see here with this, good part about it, on the south end, any neighbors that are down there, they don't have any windows to deal with, anything like that. The neighbor on the east side of the property on that right side doesn't have any windows over there, so there's nothing, even with the 10-foot side setback, there's nothing that would end up having any of the activities that are taking place in the shed filling over into their concern. This window and this door opens up to the backyard, and so you can see what it opens up to is the backyard and then the part of the drain field at the back. And then this, again, shows that those quadrants that I was talking about. So we've got that open porch portion, the 12 by 10, and then you've got the 12 by 10 here with the garage, and then that then extends around to the backside. 360 square feet total for that area of the storage, the enclosed storage space, and the 120 square feet for the open porch area that would be there directly behind the modular home. I've got the options that I presented in the staff report for your consideration, and my conclusion with reviewing the variance criteria. You've seen this before, that I have the applicant's verbatim analysis, their responses to our criteria, and then our analysis of each of those provided for record, and then we provide the 3 options for your approval. Planning board finds that all the variance criteria have been met. And then you would then approve application 3328 if you do find those criteria have been met. For an 8-foot reduction, the distance between structures from the required minimum 10-foot separation between the principal structure and the accessory structure at 34 Ormond Beach Drive, conditioned upon the garage accessory structure being modified to meet the Florida Building Code's fire-resistant rating or construction requirement. If instead you find that the criteria have not been met, then you would determine that a denial is appropriate, and that would be then hopefully outlining which criteria among those 4 plus 1 that we have haven't been met. And so we do have the 4 explicit criteria, and then the one that says this is the minimum relief necessary. And then the final option for you would be to continue this tonight's request to a time and date certain to preserve public notice on the basis that you don't have sufficient information in order to render a decision. And if you choose either denial or continuance, we'd ask that you be explicit in the record, providing guidance to both staff and the applicant as to first your reasons for denial, or in a condition of continuance, that you tell us what you want us to bring back for you. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll close, await any questions or comments, submit my report for the record. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. I have a quick question. I think this was it 840 square feet or something, or structure?
I think in total, what I have there, 480.
480 plus the existing house. When you add them
1,800.
together, they're still not exceeding the overall area you can build on the property.
Correct, yes, sir. I think there was a total of, I think I did the math there, 960, don't quote me there, but it's in the staff report. I think it was potentially 960 square feet that were available.
Okay, would the applicant like to present? Come up and then state your name in the microphone here at the podium.
My name is Chuck Smith. I'm the owner of Cornerstone Building Company and the contractor. We presented this for staff review and your consideration. We've tried to do the best we could with the site limitations, and we're trying to give our customers something they can use, and this is basically about the only way we can position this on this property where she can store her vehicle and have a porch and then have some additional storage on the left-hand side there. I mean, the way it is right now with the doors lined up, that's pretty much the only way that she's going to be able to use the building. If there's any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
What sort of additional fire protection would be included?
Well, the only part, I've been speaking to Bo about this, Bo Snowden, and we've agreed that the porch framing, we would make heavy timber construction, which would meet that criteria. And that just means that everything we frame there has to be 3 inches minimum. And we have a structural metal roof on it, so there's no plywood or deck or anything like that. So all of that porch would be constructed to heavy timber code.
Any other questions for the applicant? Mr. Langella?
I have a bunch of questions. I'm trying to limit it, though. The idea that this is 2 feet away from the house is probably problematic in the building world. That's very close. So I had asked Adam, did anyone talk about attaching the two? And then there's another variance we would then look at. But, and I'm not even getting to the criteria of the variance, but just to start off with, what is the feasibility of making these attach?
It's doable.
Then you won't have that fire, because to meet the 1 hour fire rating, you'd have to show a fire rating assembly that would meet one of the fire rate, pre-approved fire rate assemblies.
Right, the heavy timber would do that.
Right,
The
so they're
heavy
gonna
timber-
look at,
heavy
they're gonna
timber
look at
part.
the soffit, they're gonna look at the roof, the whole thing. So you'd have to fit into one of those pre-made, I think of the company now, but you know what I'm talking about. They have pre-made assemblies, you have to show them that listing. So that's what the building
A
department.
UL assembly?
The UL assembly. See, the building department's gonna require you to show a UL assembly. So you may get stuck and not be able to show a UL assembly for that particular application. Just to say, you're doing it in timber, they're gonna come back to you and say, well, show me the UL for the roof, show me the UL for the parts of the wall. I was trying to find what is the unique characteristic in the property that would allow you to get the variance?
size limitations of
Okay.
it and the setbacks.
So the size limitations are not unique to this whole subdivision, though, correct, Adam?
That's correct.
So is there something else in particular that's unique to the property? I mean, help me out here. Give me something that I can work with, because,
The only thing that's unique to the property in my experience is, something we have to deal with to construct this building are the setback requirements and the separation. I've been in business 28 years and I've built lots of structures where there really wasn't a separation requirement between a house and a garage. You pretty much could put it as close as you wanted to. So that's one thing that we have to overcome. That's our major hurdle. And to try to fit this to where she can use the building, I mean, we could put a different shaped building back there and meet all your requirements, but it wouldn't do her any good. It'd just be a long, skinny storage shed, and she couldn't store her vehicle in it. And that's what she mainly wants this building for, is to keep her vehicle out of the weather.
you know, Adam, as you know, as you pointed out, this zoning district being 1 acre, doesn't it all fit into this whole area right there? I think there's several streets like this right down there. And as a matter of fact, just as a point of reference, I happen to know Mr. Armin Fischetti, who did all this land way back in the day. But we have a setback requirement that is very difficult to fit. Now, other neighbors are building things, and that's what a couple, at least one letter, if not a duplicate of the same one, I don't know, is complaining about that, you know, hey, we've all had to build things and we couldn't fit it on here. So to meet the variance requirement, I don't know if poor land development code rules is a part of it. I mean, it should be, if you ask me, because we've been talking about changing, you know, a lot of things as LDC we haven't touched. And this is something that is problematic, because we had this out even on the west side of the county. I remember there were a lot out there we were dealing with that. They're out in the middle of the country, and they have, you know, the lot is small because that's what it was done, and then they couldn't meet all these great requirements that lots just don't fit, so. Is that septic an above-ground septic, that drain field?
Yes, it's a mounded system.
So that limited where you could put the house?
I didn't build the house, but I would assume
No,
so,
well,
because of the size of the drain field. And I think someone had said the minimum setback was 25 feet from the side property line, so it looks like, in my opinion, that's the only place they could put a mounted septic system on the site.
Mr. Smith, could I get you to just take a little half step to your right? We're struggling trying to get you on the microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's all
Okay.
right.
Adam, let me, for clarity, understand this. So if this structure roof was L-shaped instead of square, then we would have no need for a variance because the wall-to-wall separation meets our 10-foot code.
No, sir.
And so it's just the roof that we're talking about, the separation from eave to eave or gable to gable is all the separation that we need a variance for, not the actual structure itself. Am I reading that correctly?
That is right. If it was an L-shaped structure with an L-shaped roof, then you would, and the walls then supporting that L-shaped roof, and then to those walls at its closest point, we do the math, and we're minimum 10 feet from the what ends up being the southeast corner of the modular unit to the whatever ends up being the equivalent on the now L-shaped building, and we're at least 10 feet. We're good.
But the front left corner wouldn't be
Well,
10
talk
feet.
about that. Talk about the difficulty in building a roof and
got
at least
Gina
and
saying
having
no.
a patio
I'm not
with no
following-
roof over rather than a roof.
So Gina, I think, is trying to tell me that I'm supposed to talk about the building code projection language probably, but I'm not. Okay. We're not catching you on a microphone. L-shaped building.
L-shaped building, but he's bringing the garage door still closer to the unit.
Right, the front, even if we made it L-shaped, like, say by eliminating the porch, if you will, our front corner of the garage would still be too close.
I don't think anybody heard what I said, so that as long as your separation is still there and you're 10 feet, whatever, if it ends up being 10 feet, then you're good. If you're not 10 feet, then you're not good. So if it's garage door, whatever it is, if it's a wall, a garage door has to have a wall to hold up the garage door. So don't misunderstand me, a shed has a wall. If that wall then, from that to the building is 10 feet, then we're golden. So it can be pyramid shaped. I don't know what you want to call it. L shape doesn't work. What I'm trying to say is it's got to be 10 feet. If it's 10 feet, it's golden.
Okay,
So if it's not, then we fail.
10 feet behind the house, 10 feet on a diagonal from the corner of the house.
Correct.
10 feet is 10 feet. That's the way you interpret the
Wall to
code?
wall, yes, sir.
Okay.
Any questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you, sir.
I have a question for Adam, though. The significance of the 10 feet between the accessory building and is that a fire code? Or what's the significance of that 10 feet that's telling us we have to be 10 feet?
It's in our code for the accessory buildings. You know, it's not a fire requirement because it's separation from your accessory building. So if you want to burn down everything you've got, that's up to you to do. And it shows up in the residential zoning district. So an oddity that we have is that if you're in the agriculture zoning district, you don't have to have that 10-foot separation. So you could have your shed or accessory building closer. I think it's something that's supposed to give you some. I don't think it's fire. I think it's just something that's maybe an aesthetic. Other codes I've been involved in other areas have something like this. There's no magic to the 10 feet. There is magic to the building code requirement that says 3 feet. And so that is something that's important, and that is projection language. That's something that talks about different than this, not wall to wall. That's eave to eave. When we're getting to that point. And so that's a consideration there. I can't tell you that, I mean, it could just as well be 5 feet and you know, that could be there. I think it's more of just an aesthetic, more of something to be able to create a distinction. Because if you attached it to the home, at some point you're getting so close that it's as if it becomes part of the principal structure. It may not actually have a physical attachment, but at some point, because of common roof lines, and we've had this before, we've had the house being taller, the shed or outbuilding being shorter, where you'd have one over the other that effectively from the top, if you were looking down, projecting down in two-dimensional, it would look as if it was a single building. So I'd probably say more than anything else, it gives us the ability to point at something and say that's the accessory, and then this is the principal.
Okay, we'll open it up for any public comments. Anybody from the public like to come up to the podium and speak to this topic? Okay, seeing none. If you come back up and
I meant to mention this. I have some neighbors that have expressed support for this, if that, you'd like that.
yeah, I think we have that in our packet.
No, I just got it from the owner today.
Yeah, you sent us to us via email, so we passed it on to our board members.
Be an email,
They have
okay.
it.
Do it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just make a comment. I mean, it looks like if this was a house and a garage built from the beginning and it was all attached, it wouldn't be a problem. It would be a house with a nice either carport or garage attached for the porch.
Then then they'd have to meet the 25, the rear setback.
20 foot. Right, but if they was to slide this thing and touch the building, he would be 12 feet from the rear. So we'd be looking for an 8-foot variance.
The rear.
The rear. Right now, I don't know, The 2 foot is a little bit problematic for maintenance and whatever, but
Right.
so, I mean, in my wild dream here, I could maybe see that long skinny mound becomes a unique characteristic of the lot if I wanted to go there and say that was the criteria one. I mean, I'm struggling with this one, to be honest with you. The justification is that they bought the property and they just want to put more on there than what the property holds. But the zoning in that area is problematic, and it should be, we had this with some other lots in the Hammock too, and, we were giving them variances because the zoning, I think it was, I forgot the subdivision over there, but it was a problem. I think it was the lake behind it or something. The setback from that lake was just difficult, so we get given several of them variances. I mean, there was unique characteristic of the lake and all.
Mr. Chairman, I may, if I could, take a stab here with this, following Mr. Langeto's logic. And so if you look at what's showing, and we didn't talk about this necessarily at the TRC, but the septic tank that's there, the mounted system that's there, what you're seeing in those limits. And so what I had said when I first looked at it, and I think I put it in the staff report, you've got the home, you've got the covered porch, you've got the 25-foot front, so that's the minimum from the onset. And then you have this kind of balancing of it on the two sides, 25 and 25. The width here being 30, you do the math when you get done, you've got 80 feet of width. We got nothing left on the sides. Well, that's really not exactly right, because the mounted system, it fills up the entirety of that 25 feet, with the exception of the side 7.5 foot. So you can see that we're avoiding here on this side is what this did on that west side when the septic was put in. It determined what would happen on the east side. And so by having it here linear, it could have been done a different way, maybe to go around to the backyard also. You always want to have some portion of your backyard. That these being sized, we all know that, sized based on the unit. So again, make the unit smaller. You don't need as much of a septic tank and drain field, but this may be even being kind of atypical, because it is that linear. What other configuration could you have here? I mean, you can see it's almost at the front of the home. It goes right all the way just about to the rear, right to the 7.5 foot in the rear. What I'm seeing here is that because of the mound of the system, there was not an option to get any closer on the west side. And so to use this as a circumstance, a unique condition, and I get that, I'll admit that, I think everybody will, that the unit size being what it is, the number of bedrooms, all that determines the septic, but the septic then being what it is, what it has to be, then fits only here, and then could only fit like it fits to establish that west side setback. And then the east side, what you're left with as the remainder, just by happenstance, ends up being the 25 feet wide. That then at least sets that in motion. I'm hearing what y'all are talking about. I guess you could put a carport on the side of the modular. That would take it sort of out of the weather. If your concern is to park your vehicle there, it's not secured, it's a carport. I guess you could enclose that in. You can come up with some design to make that enclosed, and then on that side, then that would meet that 7.5 foot side setback. Remember, our eaves would have to be set back outside of the drainage easement. You'd have the 25 foot and the 20 rear. I mean, I guess there's an option. Would any one of us want to have that on the side of our home? Probably not, but that's maybe something there too to consider. I guess more than anything else, I just wanted to mention that there may be some logic to the septic system on that left side, on the west side, then establishing what was left as the remainder on the east side.
I can also add that
East and
in the
west.
1970s, when this place was platted, the septic requirements were totally different than they are today. So there are going to be homes in that place that don't have this type of septic system, making these more unique than other ones that are already out there. But if they can attach the two and we can give them relief at 8 feet in the back, means probably makes more sense than having that 2-foot area.
I'm with Mark on that one too. I feel more comfortable attaching them and going for the rear variance than having one attached and.
You know, being that this is on the beach side over there, cars rust pretty bad over there, I know. So I wouldn't say it's a requirement, but it's important to be able to park your vehicle inside of a garage. So trying to give them as much relief as I can, I could see there's a need for it. But
Well, it would seem, just someone has a parcel 80 by 125, the house isn't excessively huge, it seems a shame that they wouldn't be able to have a garage. And it looks like this would look nice from the street, and, it's in the back, there's still a setback from the back line, so, I'm certainly in favor of a variance for them.
With it detached or attached?
The 2 feet seems, that's what they want to do.
I mean, the 2 feet just doesn't make any sense
do-
to me. It looks, it's more of a problem than,
The more-
it's like, if we're gonna do it for them, I'd like to see it attached.
Yeah, I would agree. A lot cleaner and better design if it's attached, rather than have a 2-foot alleyway there. So with that, do we have any motions or further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, if I could jump in one more time?
Yes, Adam?
If you do have the attachment, then the condition language about the accessory structure being modified to meet the Florida Building Code's fire resistant rating or construction requirement, I think would not be needed. But you may want to just put a caveat there that just says if necessary or something there. But if they're attached, I believe that drops out because you're no longer, you don't have a separation. It becomes part of the integrated unit. If you choose to go in that direction and then convert it to an 8-foot rear setback variance for your approval, drop out that condition, please.
That's,
I mean, we don't have any elevations of the home itself, but my suspicion is that the gable end of this house is on the side that this garage is proposed to. I don't know how you're going to attach this building with the offset that it has and get the peak of this building underneath the eave of the existing structure. So I'm not sure you can even do the attachment. Maybe the builder could
could you come
clue
up,
us in on that, but
get some clarification on that? If we decided, if this was approved to be attached, what would you do?
It'd be very easy to attach it to the back end wall of the house. Both of the roof lines are running in the same direction. You've got a peak on the back, you would just slide the peak of the garage to the house. The house is probably a little taller than the garage, so we don't have to match roof lines, and it's gonna look better that way too. And we wouldn't make a structural connection to the modular home. We build our own frame line, but then we're allowed by the building code just to flash to it. And what we'd probably have to do is just flash to the wall. We probably wouldn't even affect the existing roof of the home.
yeah, I think if he flashes the buildings together, that would meet all the issues that I see, maintenance and whatnot.
Anything else?
Anything else?
that's all I have.
Thank you. All right, with that, do we have a motion?
I have a question.
Yes.
If your board direction is to change the setback to the rear, this was publicly noticed for the distance between structures and not the setback on the rear.
I was gonna mention, do they have to come back again and do a new application?
I don't think so.
Defer to Mr. Hadid.
So Gina, your point is if you move the garage back 2 feet, it'll be 4 feet from the house?
No, I think she's saying that they haven't requested a rear yard setback, they requested a separation of building setback. And so we can't approve a rear yard setback with the agreement that they attach, because that's not what notice for our meeting tonight.
Yeah,
I
but
think what we could do is table this to give the applicant the opportunity to amend the application.
Yeah, but we have changed the variance on this board in the meeting. Matter of fact, I can think of right off the bat, the Eagle thing down there, they wanted a front setback. We just changed the rear setback. And I can't remember a few other ones. There was a sign in Seaside Landings, I guess it is, that needed a variance, and we changed what the criteria was there. I think we publicly noticed what the project is, but I'd like to hear from the attorney if he has any different opinion.
I don't think that you necessarily need to re-advertise in order to grant this variance. It's consistent with the general thrust of the application to resolve the issue of the accessory building. So I think it's within the contemplation. Now, understand that if you make that choice, the consequence of it is that a neighbor is not able to argue about your decision to join them and modify the rear setback, because that's not what they read. So I understand that is an issue, but I don't see that. I mean, they could be here. They're told that this is the opportunity to address this. They have voiced their view. So I think that they've had their due process. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman? Adam, if, we had these things before, and again, on this particular board, do we, help make the recommendation that staff look at these particular things, need lots of records? Because this, my thought isn't this one lot. This one lot has its unique characteristics, we're calling it. But this is going to be common to other such lots. We've had this, and not only in Armand Beach, like I said, we even had it out on the west side. Just a lot of record that just happened to be a small lot somebody picked off, and it just didn't fit. These rules don't fit. And, the future land use map doesn't make any sense that a future land use map would call out the future of all these lots of record. I mean, what's the idea that someone's going to buy them all up and make larger lots out of them? I mean, that's never going to happen. So it wouldn't even make sense that we have it on the future land use map. And I don't know if we have a smaller designation. I know, cities do, and they have lesser requirements for the setbacks. People who live in those tighter areas expect to have lesser setbacks. It's just the norm for that. So if by making this, are we setting you up to say, let's revisit this stuff and try to eliminate this issue going forward? And look at, obviously we're not a policymaker, so it has to go to the commission.
The scary part I have, and I do think the lot of record regulations that we have give a degree of protection to existing owners, and so that's the idea. It's got you probably heard me talk about it before, it's predictability. And so you do have this ability, and I kept thinking there may have been some genius to the design that we have in this area, both R1 and MH1 zoning districts. MH1 appropriate where mobile homes are allowed, and there are a few areas here that do allow that in the hammock. And almost with the totality, I can say the generalization and not get into too much trouble, but where those areas show up, there are older plats, less than the acre requirement that both of those zoning districts would require. And you can see here the advantage that you have as it applies to the principal use only would be that reduction in your side yard setback from 10 to 7.5 feet in each of these. Well, and you do have the abutting any street from 25 to 20, so that it's minimal what's there. I think the protection that's there right now is that there can't be any further divisions that would take place. I am, at the same time I say that, I'm trying to balance that if something did happen catastrophically to the area, if we had the Hurricane Ian situation that made landfall in this area, you could only then rebuild to I guess actually it still pertain to the lot of record setbacks. It's maybe not as scary as I thought it was, but each one of those then platted lots would still be able to rebuild only as the lot of record establishes those setbacks to exist. I don't know if I'm compelled to come up with something less, because a lesser requirement, I think, would then, it's, you got this grandfathering idea, you got this, the idea that it's established, they're legally there, they're legally nonconforming, and there's the limitations that are present. And then if you have something smaller than as a permitted, I think then that you maybe are in some ways putting the camel's nose underneath the tent for something more to be done at a greater density, and that's my caution. At least I've always felt that, and I don't know if I'm articulating it as well as I had intended to talk about it, but I think right now there's some advantage of saying, well, there it is. A lot of record applies, and so be it. That normally these would require an acre minimum. These don't have that because of how they were platted. And to do something lesser to make these conforming lots, I think, would potentially allow for greater density in the future. Buy into that?
No, I don't.
Okay, got it. All right. I've always
I
thought
mean,
that.
Sounded good, though.
It sure did.
I mean, I think if, these lots are already divided to what they are. The density is already
They are.
established. We're not opening new zones up of this size, but the ones, these lots of record that are just problematic should have a zoning that meets what they are, instead of what you have wished they would have been. That ship has sailed. And you're never going to get them to become that, and to say, well, we're going to let these people suffer that way. There's no chance somebody else will come in and try to make a subdivision, which your rules don't allow it to happen, you know, of a little more density. I mean, you're not going to get any more density on these lots by doing this, though.
If anything, my fear becomes if I start, because I'd almost be doing this, maybe I'd be better off doing a bunch of PUDs up here. But maybe this is where I was heading, was the idea that here I've got 80 by 125. So here really I'm talking about maybe I go in and I say everything's 0.23 acres, you know, not exactly a quarter acre, somewhere right around that. And so I'd have that here. But maybe I don't have that same situation in Marineland Acres. And so when I'm trying to broad brush it, then I'm coming in and maybe I don't have the 80 by 125s there. And so then I'm allowing for something more potentially. I'm worried that I'd have to have each one would have the conforming zoning for what it was platted as. Was the other thought I had, to make it where every one of these became conforming versus their current non-conforming
I
condition.
mean, some of them, some places do percentage of width and depth, you know, 10%.
For your setbacks, yep.
Setbacks versus having a set number so that it does
Not a
fit
bad
for
idea.
different. Anyway, I'm not necessarily the one making this motion, so I don't know if there's someone else brave enough to make the motion. I was just sort of setting it up and see how everybody else felt. That's what I was.
Any further discussion or any motions from the board?
I would second the motion.
Pardon?
I would second a motion like this.
Well, would it be problematic? I mean, what do we have to do if do we have to change the nature of the application if we say, like we were discussing earlier, that we want to require the building be attached to the home?
No, I think what you'd say is the criteria have been met and approves application 3328 for an 8-foot reduction in the rear setback from the required minimum 20-foot rear setback
For a principal structure.
for a principal structure at 34 Armor Beach Drive. And if you want to leave in that condition, if needed, that It won't be a garage accessory structure. Actually, I still think that's not needed. I don't think that's, I think in the end, it becomes part of the principle. I don't think you need that firewall there. Yeah, that's true. And Mr. Adid saying it would just be imposed if it has to be done, at the
Right, the
time of
building
permitting.
code is
As a
gonna-
condition.
That'll dictate it. So I think what I'm telling y'all is that it would be an 8-foot reduction in the minimum 20-foot rear setback for a principal structure at 34 Ormond Beach Drive would be the modification you would do to the recommendation, or to the approval.
My problem with that approach is we're still faced with having to approve a variance. And if we can't find the criteria to approve this variance, building separation, how are we going to find criteria to approve a rear yard setback for the principal structure? It's the nature of the lot that gives us the authority or denies us the authority to grant the variance. I'm going to make a motion. I'm going to make a motion to approve based on the unique character of the lot. I find the position and the size of the septic tank to be a special condition on this particular lot of record, and I'm going to make a motion to approve the request.
I'll second it.
What request? Is it as stated in this? As stated in this, or to make the one structure?
No, approve as applied with the separation.
Yeah, if for open discussions, again, I have a problem with the 2 feet. I mean, 2 feet is problematic. That's why my idea was to move it, instead of being 10 feet from the rear, is make it 12 feet from the rear, so you're actually giving more room in the back, for in effect the same thing, but now you're not having that maintenance issue and possible structural issue when these two buildings so close to each other. You know, he was already pointing out, with the eaves and that on the building code issue. I think he's going to run into problems showing a UL listing to get through the building department. I think when he goes to the building department, they'll say, that's fine, but that doesn't take care of your roof and structure. But if you put the two together, you won't have that problem. And now you're going, instead of 10 feet from the rear, you're going 12 feet from the rear.
Well, I don't disagree with any of that, but that's a construction concern, not a variance concern. So, tell me again, am I at liberty to approve something that hasn't been requested? I don't know how I do that at this meeting.
Have to turn that on. Okay, there we go. Yes, you have a very particular variance application, but we have to look at it from up here. And it's the siting of the accessory structure, which is a garage. So they've provided a particular configuration of how they wanted it. The same exceptional circumstances that you cited would apply. And, whoops, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be. And what you're essentially doing is you're saying you want to recite it in a way that minimizes the problems with the property, with the setbacks, et cetera. I don't see that. If I could think of another example, I mean, if he just, let's make this up. Let's say that he thought you were very resistant to this accessory structure, and he said, I'll tell you what. We can build a pavilion that the car can go under, and a patio, and a fire pit for them, and I want to ask for that. Well, you can say, well, okay, that's different. That's materially different than the scope of what you're asking. So I could see in that circumstance, you would say you couldn't grant him that complete change. Here, it's the siting within setback lines. It's all the same. It's just moving it around. I don't see, now, it's up to you. If you feel, and you're entirely at liberty, you're within your legal discretion to say, assuming you want to go that the buildings are joined or make any other deviation of whatever, to ask him to come back and amend his application. And then you set it for hearing again, and then you don't have that concern whatsoever about people having an opportunity to voice their opinions about the slight reciting of the structure. But I don't believe that you're required to do that. Now, you want to grant the application as presented, that is certainly within your prerogative. You've got a motion and a second, I know.
Okay, well, following that line of logic then, my findings on the unique character of the lot stand, and I amend my motion to approve the siting of the structure in this general location and grant a variance for that purpose with a condition that it be attached to the house as part of the permanent primary structure.
Excellent.
And I would second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I just wanted to and so I'm just on clarification. So we are giving him an 8-foot relief now to the rear setback is the unique characteristic of that.
Principal structure.
variance. Okay.
With the condition of attaching the garage and the single-family existing
Yeah.
residence.
For the record, Mr. Chairman, I'll mention, and just the obvious part, that actually will be an increase of 2 feet with no increase in height on the garage. So that what you'll end up, I get it, it's going to be part of a combined structure, but where previously we were discussing a 10-foot rear setback for a detached accessory garage, now we will end up having operationally a 12-foot rear setback for the same massing of structure that's adjacent to that rear setback, albeit now it's included as if it's part of the principal. So your variance is still that 8-foot rear off of a 20-foot required, leaving 12-foot minimum at the rear.
So I just have one question. If we approve such a variance to the principal structure, could they go change their mind and say, we're just going to add 2 more bedrooms to the back of the house, we're going to skip the garage idea?
They could.
But they'd have to come back here, wouldn't they?
No.
If they could not exceed the total impervious,
And we're good with that. I think I reviewed that. The one caveat I'll add to that, and I think that may make it problematic, depends on what those, if you mentioned bedrooms, septic tank. So you'd have to come back with a larger septic, larger drain field. But I think I've done the math in there where they would not be exceeding either the lot coverage or the impervious if they said, yeah, we changed our mind, we're going to make this better.
actually, I think they now also go not only on bedrooms, but square footage of living area. So just making it a game room would also possibly increase the,
I'm not suggesting they would do it, but just
no?
for the future, if we approve these things, be a change happening. All right, any further discussion? We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the application passes. All right. With that, are there any other staff comments?
Everyone, please stay safe, prepare yourselves, your family, wish everyone all the best.
Anything from the board? All right, anything from the public not related to the agenda tonight?
Mr. Chair, although I'm not from the public, I wanted to introduce our new Assistant County Attorney, Ronnie Moore. She's working with us. She'll, at some point, be serving you as a board under Sean's excellent tutelage. I won't corrupt her mind. I'll let Sean do that. So anyway, I wanted to introduce her. She has an excellent background. She worked in the Department of Environmental Protection for many years. Hazardous waste issues, contaminated properties and so forth, has litigated cases, Administrative Procedure Act, and those of you familiar with Administrative Procedure Act litigation, it's very complicated, very demanding. So we have that level of expertise. Plus, she also served as staff counsel to the House Environmental Committee for about 4 years. So she's got that, also some legislative depth. And, you know, we always have to deal with the twists and turns of legislation in the county. So she's a very, very welcome addition, and I hope you welcome her. Thank you.
Excellent. Welcome. All right, with that, we have a motion to adjourn.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.